7?
I think it's 7. I remember when we started uploading like the first one and we put it on RSS. We don't have the podcast on RSS anymore because
no, we do not, because it is no longer free.
Yeah, it's not free anymore and we're a startup.
Yeah.
But it was like, RSS was like, did you know only X% of podcasts make it to their 7th episode? And I remember seeing that at the time and being like, 7 seems like a lot, but here we are.
But here we are with 7.
Exciting.
Breaking down the percentages. We are rising above.
That we are.
Look at us being in the top percentile of podcast episodes. Speaking of top percent of things, so this morning, let me give you backstory. Yesterday, I come into the office, and Sarah has for me little baggies of bread.
I like making bread.
Delicious bread. And this morning, I popped one in the toaster. It was a bread with chocolate chips in it.
Oh, I had that for breakfast too, actually.
Oh, God, it was so good. And I took my first bite and phenomenal.
Yeah? Well, it's because it's like
phenomenal.
not very sweet, but it's rich.
Yes. And I enjoy a good tart chocolate. Like, I'm not a milk chocolate girly.
Yeah.
I definitely want like that 90%.
Yeah. It's like a little bit bitter almost.
Yeah.
Just like me.
A little butter on it. Sweet, but also bitter.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I've been baking a lot this last week. I think that just shows that I've just been coping with life. But the pesto and mozzarella one I made last night too was so fun. Yeah. I just about blew up my entire house with it, but it was great.
Yeah, it looked good on your baking bread.
Thank you.
Photos
it was a fun time.
Yeah.
So welcome back to Couch Combos, the podcast where we talk about bread and also mental health. So today's episode, it's honestly a lot more fun for us, I think, because this is when we get to really find that sweet spot between our professional career and also who we are as people. So today's episode will be on the rules that we break as therapists,
which is so exciting because we talk all the time about how like we're therapists, but we're also like people, and we want to break the boundaries of like what therapy looks like and what counseling looks like. And so today you're gonna get a little glimpse into that, right? To see like what it's like,
absolutely,
in the sessions with us. And how that might be different.
It also just makes me laugh that like we're considered kind of rebellious therapists in some realms of the world sometimes. Yeah. Really, honestly, comical knowing us as people. Sure. So I think that brings us to you as a person. Mm-hmm. How do you react to rules in your real life? Like, do you like to follow them? Or are you just like,
So, I am definitely a rule follower, 100%. If there is a rule, I will want to follow it to the T. But the difference is it has to be like a posted rule.
Okay.
So if it's not a posted rule, then I'm like, there's some gray area in that.
Some flexibility.
I don't know. Yeah, there's some flexibility. Like even, driving, for example. Sure, that's posted on like signs. Yeah. But I've heard that you can go like 5 over and it's okay with the cops. So for me... I like take that and I run with it a little bit of like, well, if I can do 5 over and I won't get pulled over, then I can do 10 over because if I see a cop, I'll have enough time to slow down 5 miles per hour and get to. So there's caveats with that. Sure. Of I love rules and I follow them. Yeah. Unless.
You just give it your own little like zest.
Yeah,
you put
I just
your spin
do
on
the little salt sprinkle on it. No, but I am a person that if like I know that I broke a rule and then it's like something super huge, I will start like sweating and crying and turn bright red.
Has there ever been a rule that you've really broken and it's like, oh no, I'm done for?
Yes, it actually happened in college.
Oh dear.
And it was like an accidental breaking of a rule.
Oh, those are the worst.
Like I didn't even know that I was breaking said rule.
So it wasn't intentional.
No, it wasn't intentional. But I did have to go in front of like our honor council, which I was actually on honor council.
Which makes sense. I would imagine you would be on that.
Yes. And they were like, Caroline, what is this? I said, listen, I didn't realize that this was a rule. Sure. I'm so sorry. And they're like, girl, it's okay. Write a paragraph. You're fine.
That's
so
great. I love
it was
that.
nice. At least they knew like my morals and my values.
Right.
And they were like, oh, this was totally an accident.
I will say, I can't imagine you ever intentionally breaking a rule, like for anything, unless it's like help somebody else.
Yeah.
Like I could see you speeding if like someone you cared about was in danger. Like I'm thinking about like heaven forbid like something happened like Granny or your parents. Mm-hmm. I imagine like you wouldn't care what rules and laws there were. You'd be like, no, I'm going to see my people.
Oh, for sure. And it's actually funny, the rule that I was just talking about, I broke it to help someone. So it was because either I got in trouble or they got in trouble, and they were going to get a lot more trouble than I was. So I was like, I will take the blame for this.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. Okay, so what about you? I kind of already know, but don't know.
So honestly, when I think about rules, I immediately think of my brother. Yeah. And obviously the people that are listening to this probably won't know who he is. So for context, my brother is genuinely like my hero. He's one of the best people I've ever met. I'm very grateful that he's not only my brother, but my friend as well. The man doesn't like rules at all. Mm-hmm. And he and I are very similar. And honestly, most of my family is this way too. If someone tells us like to do something, we're going to do the opposite. Actually, I think I just said that this morning or yesterday or something.
You did. Yeah.
I don't like being told what is right versus wrong because I'm going to be like, why? Mm-hmm. But if it's something like road rules or things like that, when I'm like, oh no, like it's for the greater good, it's to keep everybody safe. It's like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. But if it's just like this, do as I say, just because I said so, I'm like, no.
I'm going to bump the system.
Right. Which is, I don't even know where that comes from. I just have it all around me. Like Ryan, my spouse, is the same way too. So I think it's the same. Like we're all like very well intended, but just a little bit more like, not rebellious, but like anarchist sometimes.
Anarchist.
Yeah, I just think that I want to understand why I'm doing something and what is it for. Mm-hmm. And if I don't believe in that or if I don't agree with it, it's gonna be like, well, no, I'm gonna embrace a gray area then, and I'm gonna make it more of a guideline, not a rule.
A guideline. There you go. And, you know, those guidelines are, like, based off of your morals and your values, which are great.
Right.
So.
Because I'm the same way. At the end of the day, I am a rule follower. Mm-hmm. Like, even as a kid, I would punish myself worse than my parents ever would. Because I would put myself in timeout emotionally. Yeah. Like, they wouldn't have to worry about me because they're like, no, like, what Sarah's going to do in her own brain is much worse than anything we could ever do or say, which is still pretty true to this day. So yes, like pretty anarchist, but at the end of the day, like honestly, I just want to do things for the greater good. So I think I'll follow things if it benefits the overall, but I don't like to have like the, I guess, like empty demands and things like that. Mm-hmm. Not about it.
You don't like to be told what to do.
No.
You're like on Finding Nemo when they said don't touch the butt. You're like, I'm touching the butt.
I'm gonna touch it and also see like why everyone's afraid of it.
Oh, that's funny. So, of course, like, as we're going into this podcast, there are some rules and things that, like, we 100% follow. So
and they're, like, the posted rules that you talked about. And, like, I understand. I literally just said that I don't love rules. I don't consider these rules. I think that these are just, like, a responsibility that we uphold. Right. Because, yes, we will be talking about basically us gone rogue as therapists. But part of our licensure, it's literally called our ACA Code of Ethics, the American Counseling Association, and we had to literally take an entire class dedicated to our ethical code, which are all the rules that we have to follow. So those are like we don't touch those. Those are obviously things that we follow all the time.
Yes. And the biggest one in that is like doing no harm.
Yes.
So like that is one that like we are not, any of these rules that we mentioned, they are not bucking up to that ethical guideline of like doing no harm and doing good and, you know, confidentiality, those things, like always those are there. Those don't even honestly feel like rules. Those just feel like non-negotiables.
That's honestly
like I would not be doing my job or being like a good human if I did not follow those.
I even remember when we were studying the ethical code and like taking that exam for it, and I just remember reading these things and thinking like, oh yikes, like people don't follow these.
Right. Like, is this even a question that needs to be on the test? Like, do people actually do these things?
But then I realized like they exist because, you know, someone didn't do that, which is really scary. So if you've been impacted by someone who didn't follow these guidelines, we are very sorry.
Yes.
That is not okay. But luckily, like, I am glad that they are there to help provide accountability for therapists, because there isn't a ton, I will say. So I'm just glad that we have that at the very basic level.
At the very, very basic level. So yes, of course, we're gonna go into some things that some people be like, oh my gosh, you guys do that, and like our schooling at where we went to grad school, they're gonna probably, if they heard this, it'd be like, pearl clutch. We told you guys specifically not to do those things. And you know, we have been in this career for like 6 years now.
Wow. Oof.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Made me just feel really old. But yeah, so for like 6 years. So we've had the experience in community-based, school-based, private practice-based, non-profit based, not-for-profit based. So like we've had the ability to see different environments and different settings and like what things we feel like we can kind of like push a little bit.
Absolutely. So these rules that we talk about breaking today are ones that are kind of like the field has normed them to be like not okay, or like Caroline said, like our graduate program, we actually would have debates on a lot of these, which thinking back, I was really wondering like why we weren't in the clinical sphere enough to be able to really debate that quite yet. I think I would have rather like heard a podcast like this and had that debate. Because like, I mean, like we had our internship, but that's not years of experience quite yet. So these are things that your therapist, if it's someone that's not us, they might also break this rule, or they might follow the rule. But just know that like it's not jeopardizing our licenses or anything like that. It's just as a cultural norm, it's something that's typically not okay. So we're going to break down all of these different rules, why they're deemed not okay, how we break them, and why we do it. So I will say that we're very intentional therapists. So if we're breaking a rule, we're breaking it for a reason.
Yes, we are. So first one, and this one's kind of like a basic, very easy. Putting our degrees up on the wall.
That was one that our graduate school told us to not do. I will say I do understand what their reasoning was. And so their reasoning was having your degrees posted in your office seems a little bit elitist for a client. So if a client isn't educated, then they might feel less than, or they might feel insecure or self-conscious, which absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
But we both have our degrees in our offices. And I know for me, if I have a client who feels insecure because of my degrees, like, of course I would want to talk to them about it. But I also, especially because like we're young therapists, we both look like young therapists because we are. I want clients to come in and feel comfortable and like they're working with a clinician who's credentialed and who should be here. I think especially when working with like parents and families sometimes too. It also gives me the reminder of like, no, you deserve to be here and you're credentialed to be here too.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like we worked hard for those degrees. And so it kind of feels like invalidating to me as a therapist to not be able to say like, hey, I spent a lot of time and effort to get this degree. So I should be able to like put it up on my wall and say like I'm proud of this thing that I did, not in a like I think I'm better than you or you should feel inferior, but more of like a I'm proud of myself kind of thing. And quite frankly, sometimes when my imposter syndrome like steps in, I like to look over my wall and be like, okay, no, I did go to school for this. I know what I'm doing. I'm not just like stepping into this room making things up. And so it kind of helps with that of like, no, like I have that groundwork. I have those basics. You're okay in this space. Like you deserve to be in this space kind of thing.
And so clients can feel comforted too, to be like, oh my gosh, my therapist went through all of this schooling, all this education. I can trust them. Or I know for a lot of my clients, like we talk about that I went to UGA and they're like, oh, like go Dogs. Or I have a few clients that didn't go to Georgia and they went to like a rival school and it's fun and it's rapport building. So I haven't had an issue, or my clients haven't admitted to an issue or anything. Have you had an issue with posting your degrees?
No, I've never had anyone say like, oh, you went here, or oh my gosh, you have that up. No, instead they look at it and be like, oh cool, you went to, especially with where I went to college, Presbyterian college, they're like, oh, the blue hose. And I'm like, yeah. So if anything, it's only like built that rapport and that connection with my clients. It's never been a like a sensitive topic.
Right.
Really.
It makes us like into people.
Yeah.
And they can learn more about us too.
Right.
Absolutely. So then next rule, this is kind of one of my favorites that we break, is you have to be a blank slate therapist and you can't self-disclose anything about yourself. That is a big rule that I think this is another like higher education grad school rule that like you can't really have a personality or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're taught, like specifically taught to answer this question with, well, you know, like, well, what about that question is important to you?
Why does this matter?
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, I kind of get why it matters. I'm like, I want to know, for me specifically, a lot of people say like, how old are you? Because either kids think that I'm like 50 or they think that I'm 12. So like the range there, they'll be like, how old are you?
Like
and so
95.
Yeah. I am 105 like Dumbledore. No, but being able to like sit in that and be like, no, I'm 29 years old. I know that I present really young. Right. Kids typically love that I present really young, but some parents, kind of, they're like, how long have you been doing this kind of thing? And quite frankly, I think that our clients deserve to know that and they deserve to understand that because it might help with finding like who's best for them. Sometimes you want a counselor who's like within your age range so that you feel like they connect more. It doesn't mean that we can or cannot, but sometimes you just feel more comfortable in that space. Whereas others might be like, well, I don't want a client who's a lot older than me or a lot younger than me, and they get to make the decision of, okay, I think we're a good fit or I think we're not.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a push recently. A lot of clients want younger therapists, which has been a really nice change, like from when we started in the field. I remember it was not okay, and like I actually didn't disclose my age for a long time, especially with like parents sometimes, sadly, as it would be like, well, why are you qualified to work with my child? And that brought up my imposter syndrome. So I definitely agree though that self-disclosing to an extent, there's no issue with that. Because I know that our program said that, like it wouldn't be appropriate, it blurs lines, it would be too much like friendship. But like Caroline said, like it helps establish a relationship and trust, because I don't know how much I would trust someone that I didn't know anything about either. Even if it was like a therapist, I would want to know like, okay, tell me about you. It'll make me feel more comfortable in the space, and that's okay. So I mean, even down to like my facial expressions. Obviously, I'm a little bit more expressive with some clients than others, but it brings more authenticity into the space, because if I have a facial, I mean, I read everything on my face. I don't have a blank slate face at all. It helps clients in the moment be able to gain more self-awareness. We have the interpersonal connection and we can process that. And sometimes I have to backtrack of even saying like, okay, I definitely had a reaction to that. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Or like, what is that like to hear my response? It's always clinical, but it still just brings in the fact that like, we're not robots.
Right. And like, of course there's a balance with that. Yeah. Like there's never a time where we will disclose to the point where it feels like we are in therapy. Correct. Or like it's all centered around conversations about us. But we have learned how to give enough for like people to feel comfortable and to realize like, no, I am not some person sitting up in a like tall building, lay down on my leather couch, and I'm just gonna stare at you and give like nonverbal cues. Like no, I'm gonna like have like inflex in my voice and my face is gonna change and I'm gonna be like, okay. Or when they do have like a direct question asked towards me, as long as it's not something where we feel like, okay, we're making it about us, then we're gonna answer, especially with teenagers. Oh, absolutely. Teenage girls, they're like, why would I tell you anything? You're not gonna tell me anything. I'm like, that's actually very fair. Yeah. So I think that was actually probably what got me to start disclosing, because initially, like on the onset, like of course me, rule follower, I was like, I'm not telling them anything ever. It's going to always be that, until I believe it was a teenage client who called me out and said like, why would I tell you anything? I don't know you. Yeah. And I was like, yeah.
I think like working with kids and teens, you have to be a person. Yeah. Because they sniff it out. Like kids and teens, they just see if you're not being real and if you're not showing up. I think my like general rule of thumb is I never want my client to know if I'm having a bad day. Yeah. But they know where I'm at any given time. Yeah. Because obviously we won't be perfect every single session. And there's some times where sadly clients will know, like if I'm under the weather, my voice is off. When I was in a boot because I broke my leg, like of course they knew that. but I'm not going to hide it. But at the same time, it's not their responsibility to take care of us. Right. So it's definitely a balance. I think that we've done it pretty well. Oh, and it just leads to better bonds and trust and better clinical work.
Right. Okay, this next one. And I remember specifically having this conversation in grad school. It was, we were in, it was like a U shape. I think we were doing clinical like case studies. So we were watching each other like in session, which is wild to think about that we did that in front of people.
Good
it's like,
us.
Oh, wow.
We survived.
Like I would literally have a heart attack if I had to do that now. But I remember us all debating of like, but I don't understand this. And so this one is, don't hand your client a tissue/Kleenex if they're crying or if anything's going on kind of emotionally, is to not hand them anything and to just let them sit in it. I do not do that.
I don't either.
Because I know when I am crying, because, okay, the thought process was, well, you're telling them that they need to like suck it up.
Yeah.
And they need to get themselves together.
Clean it up, get it together.
Yeah.
Like they save the tears for your pillow kind of vibe.
And in reality, I looked at it as, I'm supporting you because there's nothing wrong with crying.
Right.
But like, I don't want to have snot on my face. like literally, I just don't want to be snotting all over and not feeling out of control of, okay, if I want to be able to clean my face, like I don't have the autonomy to clean my face. So like for me, it's just always like a, hey, you know, like if you don't want to just let them fall, then here you go.
It's fine. Yeah. It's actually funny. When you were just describing when we were talking about it in grad school, I could like feel the room. I know that sounds kind of funky, but I could feel like the slightly stale Adderhold air and like the fluorescent lighting, the smell. I could like feel like the stress sweat coming. But it's interesting now that I think about it. Again, I feel like we shouldn't have been having these debates as grad students because we just like didn't have the time and the experience yet. Because I'm thinking about now and it's like, okay, what is the role of a tissue? Let's take away the save the tears for your pillow. Like the role of like a tissue is to make crying or sneezing more comfortable. It is to provide like relief and comfort.
They even put aloe and lotion in them. Like
I know,
only for comfort.
And the ones that we have, I just looked at a tissue box. Yeah. Ours have the lotion in it.
There you go.
And so I'm thinking about, okay, if a client doesn't want a tissue, that's fine. You don't have to grab it. It's always within arm's reach from where they're sitting so that I don't have to hand them to you, but they're available. But it's this idea of like, hey, like, I feel like that's affirming. I feel like if there wasn't tissues, I would be weird. Yeah. And before I got upset, I would think like, well, I don't feel comfortable crying because then I can't grab a tissue to like clean up my makeup or things like that. Right. I just think like having a tissue available is just a very affirming and like comforting experience. Yeah. I just don't understand. Of all the things that we could debate as therapists,
it was the tissue.
Why this one?
Yeah. And like, now I will say, because typically in like in our office, we have tissues near wherever a client is like sitting. But let's say that like we're out or something, I'll give like a little wait time. Yeah. So it's not just like instant one tear. And I'm like, here's a tissue, you know, like it's not like, oh my gosh, clean, you know, and just in case. But like, I'll give some space, give some time. And if they start like looking around kind of thing, that's like my cue of like, oh, hey, here, would you like this? Right. So once again, balance. But yes, I just try and put myself in the position of if I was a client crying, which I have been. I cry about everything. So my therapist, she had lots of tissues on hand. Like I wanted that ability to have that safety of, okay, I feel comfortable letting this out because I know that if I do start to feel uncomfortable with the way that I'm currently presenting with my tears and my sadness, I can manage that.
And I think that like, I don't know how you felt about it, but it almost made me feel uncomfortable talking about crying with clients sometimes, is knowing that we had this like unspoken rule that we can't offer them tissues. When clients would start to cry really early on in my career, I would be uncomfortable. But now if a client starts to get choked up, I'm like, okay, hold on. Something's coming up. Like, let's talk about it. Let's sit in it for a second. And I'm not like cry. Like, I'm not telling them, like, let it out. But it's like, okay, hold on. Like, if you're having an emotional expression that's coming up and coming forward, we don't have to push that down. And if it results in tears, like, that's fine. That's okay. Do whatever you need to.
It's normal and natural. My client with the apology tear, they're like, I'm so sorry. And I literally like, what are, there is no need for an apology.
I always say, like, you wouldn't go to the gym and apologize for sweating.
Yeah, exactly. I said it's a release and you need a release. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's true. And if you're listening to this and you have an opinion about any of these rules we break, let us know. Yeah. I'm obviously very curious.
We want to hear both sides.
Please,
let us know. We're very much open to, like, I cannot believe. And, like, let's talk about that. Because I want to understand that perspective as well. I just know that, like, I don't have that perspective.
No, not at all. Yeah. So our next rule is you don't touch a client. And, okay, we just have to listen. I know where your thoughts are going to. Of course, we're not going to have intimate relationships with our clients. No. That is in those ACA Code of Ethics. Yes. But when we talk about you can't touch a client, it's like, oh, we can't offer, like, a high five or a hug. Yeah. I will say that, like, I have broken that rule, but I don't do it often.
I don't do it often either. And if I do, I always ask for consent first. Like, hey, you want to, like, how about a high five? Or, hey, would you like a hug? Or how would you feel about a hug right now? Because touching, especially for me, like, I'm not really a touchy person.
I'm not either.
So it's just not natural for me to do that, which is probably why I don't do that very
I'm
often.
The same way.
But even then, like, when I am in an emotional state, sometimes I don't want to be touched. Yeah. So that's why I always kind of, like, ask that. Whereas I've had some clients who, like, crave that. Yeah. And so if, like, a kid does a great job, they want to have that high five. They want to have some kind of, like, love language of that physical touch of, like, I feel positive about this. Yeah. Or if, they're struggling, then it's I just really want to feel comforted in a way that is professional and acceptable for this context and all context, because we are in a relationship that is professional, right? So I always ask, like, for consent, but I don't break that a ton.
No, not at all. And I'm the same way. Like, I'm just not a physical touch kind of person. But I will say that, like, if a client looks at me and they say, like, can I give you a hug? Of course you can. I'm never going to say no to that. I will say that if, like, kind of, there's obviously special circumstances for everything. And there's only been one time where I have said no, but it's because of a physical safety issue for me. But I will say, like, for kids, I almost never offer a hug. I usually do, like, we can have, like, fist bump, high five, or we do, like, a special secret handshake with each other. Just to make sure that obviously, like, we're alone in a room with a child. Just to keep our body boundaries and to model that.
Well, plus, and, I am 5'11". So when a child hugs me, we're not exactly on the same height level.
The location of the face.
And sometimes kids will, like, go in, and so I'll do a little turn.
And, like, the side hug.
It's a little, like, turn and squat kind of thing. Especially with, children, because that's important.
Absolutely.
But yes, like, there is definitely a difference in the types of professional touch that occur if you are, like, in session by yourself versus if you're, like, out in the waiting room with the parent, or if, like, they're an adult versus a child. So it's just kind of, like,
just case by case.
Yeah, case by case.
But it's one of those where it's like, it's a flexible one. Yeah. Just, like, use greater judgment for that one. Yeah. What is the next one?
So next one is that in order to be a quote-unquote good therapist, you have to have a main modality. And, like, okay, so a modality is essentially, like, a theory that you use, a type of counseling. So we talked about that last two podcasts.
How to find a therapist one.
Yes, how to find a therapist. So we went through, like, CBT, DBT, polyvagal, all those things. Those are, like, modalities. A lot of people will Google and it will say CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's a modality. And essentially we're taught, like, okay, you've got to have your specific ones that you use, and you have to be fully trained, certified, and you can only use that, and you can only use it. You can't use another one.
That came from grad school.
Yes,
it really did.
So we consider ourselves
highly eclectic
therapists. Meaning we use lots of things. A lot.
But I also wonder, what did that, because obviously when I think of all these different rules, I can understand why they exist. But for that one, I don't understand why that exists. Because if I mean, it's literally, oh shoot, I can't remember what it's called. Someone that works in like the true white coat medical field, please comment wherever you're watching this about what it's called, where it's like do no harm. Oh, it's the
beneficence.
It's the Hippocratic Oath. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same thing of like doing no harm and things like that. If we're truly following by that, we won't just use one type of therapy. So I don't understand why that exists. Maybe it's so that we're qualified and trained so that we can do it effectively,
which is important.
Absolutely.
Like we
know
don't,
your stuff.
We don't throw out just like random things that we read online of like, oh, I'm going to try this random thing that I have no training in and no knowledge of. Like, that's not what we're saying. But like being able to have different tools in your toolkit because every client that shows up in a space is different. It's like, something's going to work with some person and then with another person that's not going to work, and so you have to be able to like pull from different areas and specialties.
I feel like we've broken that rule from the very start.
I
don't think I've ever followed, actually I have followed that rule once. Is because I took a job that was grant funded and the grant said I had to use a specific modality, but even then I used it, but I integrated some more like play-based therapy, art-based. I don't think we've ever really followed that one, but especially with kids and teens and young adults, I'm sorry, but you cannot have a cookie cutter one size fits all for any client, I will say, but especially for like creative brains too, and like neurodivergent brains. Absolutely not.
Right. And deep breaths.
Let's see, our next rule that we break is, you can't accept gifts from clients. That's a rule.
Yes, that is a rule. I understand where that comes from, obviously, especially with both of us did sports. And now all of those rules have changed now, so they're not even applicable, which I'm like, dang, so close, a couple years out. But it can be seen as almost like bribery of like, oh, here's this, and like trading for payment and all of that stuff. And that is not what we're saying.
It's not bartering.
No, because that isn't bartering. It's not bribery, none of that. But like, I've had clients who literally were having session at 6:30 and they will bring me like chicken nuggets.
Sure.
Because they're like,
that's so nice.
Yeah, they're like, well, it's late and we haven't had dinner and, we were going anyways. Yeah. And like in those cases, I'm like, yeah, sure. I appreciate it. I've had some clients bring me like Christmas gifts.
Yeah, I've had some holiday gifts. Or like when we're terminating session, they're like, we're not going to work with each other anymore because the client has quote unquote graduated. They'll bring something to say thank you. And like, I never expect a gift.
No.
Literally ever. So I think if a client's wanting to go out of their way to bring something as a token of thank you, of appreciation, of closure, of course. Like, I mean, I'm an honor, truly. Yeah. I remember we had debated all these debates in grad school. My goodness. No wonder why I don't like debating now. I remember we debated a dollar amount.
Yeah.
That we would accept. Yep. Which now that I think about it, that is just so not appropriate.
Well, and wasn't it the dollar amount based on how much they're paying?
Yes.
So it's like not over how much they were to pay.
And that feels so invasive. Yeah. Because it's like, you know what? If a client was thinking of me and wanted to go out of their way to do that, thank you. I'm just going to leave it at that. I want to honor and respect them as a person and trust that they're leaning into their own intuition.
So we talked about clients giving us gifts. Do you give gifts to clients?
No. Okay. No. I don't think that it's clinically relevant. Obviously, like, we give out refreshments, we give out snacks, which depending on who you ask could be seen as a gift because they don't pay for that good specifically. But there are small things like if there's like little like card, like you give out the cards with like phrases on it and like words of affirmation on it. That's all fine. I know I've left a job at one point and a child had a really hard time terminating sessions. And so I let them pick their favorite toy and I let them take it with them. Or if there's like a book that means a lot to a client and they borrow it a lot, I'd say like, oh, like you can keep that. But I wouldn't really consider that a gift, honestly. Yeah. What about you?
I've given like a book. Like I've given a book that I thought, oh, that would be really helpful. I think that this would be great for
like
you.
Like a journal. I've done
or
that
a
too.
Journal. I think I've like we'll do like breathing sticks.
Yeah.
So it's like something that's counseling
We
related.
make it together.
Yeah, and you make it and like talk about it, or like those worry stones, that kind of thing.
I don't even consider those gifts. It's just like what we do in sessions.
Yeah. But like I have gone out of my way a couple of times to say, hey, this is the item I was talking about. I recognize that, like, especially with kids, sometimes they can't always have the decision on what they get and what they don't get. And so I'm like, hey, here's a book that I think might be really helpful. And usually it's like a journal so they can write in it.
Right.
Or I've done like a guided journal before of just like thoughts that they can have.
Absolutely.
But never just like something random or like, of course, snacks, candy.
I mean, for
water,
like around Halloween, we did candy.
Yeah, we did candy.
Well, and
like
I don't know if I would consider this a gift, but I've had a few clients when sessions have fallen on their birthday or like a day before or a day after, and they still want to come because at any time I'm like, hey, like, do you still want to be here on your birthday?
Yeah.
Please know, like, this is a free pass if you want to spend your birthday. Otherwise, like, it's fine. I understand. But some of them do want to spend their birthday going to therapy, which is great. And while I won't get them a gift, I will ask if there's something that they want to do that session.
Okay.
And so, like, a lot of them have said, like, oh, like, I want to make slime. And we can make that incredibly therapeutic. It's so grounding, and we make that sensory kit. And so I'll go out and buy a slime kit for the session, but I make sure that there's enough that it's benefiting any of the kids that come in. So I guess that's like technically a gift, and of course they bring it home, but again, like, there's still a reason, and it's clinically relevant. It's not just like a, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. I mean, I'll let a client know that, like, I saw something at Trader Joe's the other day and I thought of you. I obviously didn't get it,
right,
but
I thought of you, or like a song, like, or I saw this on Instagram and I thought of you.
Right.
So definitely it's always clinically relevant. It's typically something that I would give to anyone, but also like specialized to that person too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see, what is the next one?
I think it's you have to dress quote unquote professionally, first of all, whatever that means. When you are practicing. That's another grad school one, actually.
Yeah, it is. I remember wearing a lot of blazers.
Yeah.
Which I do love a good blazer.
Of course. But that's like your style. But like, if you saw me in a blazer, you'd be like, what are you doing?
I did see you in a blazer.
Well, that was for an interview.
And I was amazed.
But if I walked in wearing
Girl looks good in a pink blazer.
But if I walked in wearing that outfit now, you'd be like,
I'd be like, you got like court today?
What are you doing?
Like, where are you going? Yeah, no, 100%. So like, and I don't even understand, and this has always been a thing, like even back in like college when you're told to like dress professionally or business cash.
It's so subjective.
I've just never understood that. So
it's like a degree thing.
Yeah. So like I just dressed the way that I would dress. Now, of course, like as far as weekend attire, I will not show up in weekend attire.
Correct.
Just because that's inappropriate.
Or like athletic wear.
Yes, or athletic wear, or things where you look like, I don't know, you're not showing up to work.
Going to the club.
Yeah, the club. But like with my outfit today, like I guess this is professional, but then some people be like, it's not professional because you're not wearing like a kitten heel.
Yeah, I'm wearing blue jeans today. Yeah. My goodness.
Which I've always been under the impression that blue jeans can be professional.
Oh, for sure.
I don't understand people who are like, blue jeans are not professional.
Right.
If you have a nice pair of like blue jeans and you pair it with like a nice top.
Sure.
I don't see anything wrong
I think
with
that just comes down to, you want your therapist to be comfortable in session, because you don't want them to be thinking about, oh my goodness, this seam is digging into my leg, or oh my gosh,
pants are so tight.
I just think about like sometimes like socks when the threads get stuck.
Oh yeah.
That's just a horrible sensory experience, and it's so overstimulating. It's like, you want your therapist to be comfortable because you want them to be thinking about what you're saying and not what they're wearing.
Yeah.
And I think people just interpret that differently. I think that, I mean, especially for us, like, we like to dress up a little bit more than maybe other people would, because it makes us feel good and it makes us comfortable. It's nothing about a client. It's nothing about that. It's just like, oh, like, we want to feel put together. Also, because we work for ourselves. There are some days where I've come in wearing like leggings and a big sweater and boots, and it's fine. I'm comfortable, and that's where I'm at that day.
Yeah.
But I will say that while we don't dress quote unquote professional, we always are put together.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't want a client to look at us and say like, are you okay? Do you need someone to come take care of you? That's not appropriate.
Yeah. And like with put together, like that even looks differently for us. Yeah. Like me, when I am not on a hair wash day, slick back bun.
Absolutely.
Every single time.
I'm usually thrown up in a ponytail anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I even remember like right before I got married, I wore a lot of like t-shirts and skirts and like I'd tie a t-shirt over a dress.
Yeah.
Because I was constantly overstimulated. I was stressed. Things were fitting me differently. And that was what I was most comfortable in. And I even remember there was a Friday where I wore like a t-shirt, jeans, and a leather jacket. And I felt fine. And like my clients didn't care because I could still do my job.
Well, I think back to when I was doing school counseling and then when I was doing private practice, and I would go straight from the school to a session. So I would literally have 30 minutes to get there. I wouldn't have time to change. Sure. There'd be days where we had dress up days and I would come into like session. I'd be like, guys,
dress up day.
I know that I am currently wearing my Halloween costume. However, like I can go and change. And usually they're like, we're fine. Especially with kids because they loved it. They're like, oh, sweet. That's what you are for Halloween. I'd be like, yeah. But like even just having that conversation with them, they were totally fine. Or I'd be like, yeah, it was, we had to wear all blue today, and I'd be wearing just like head to toe blue. I'd have face paint on.
Monochromatic.
Yes.
It's a trend.
Yeah.
Now.
And like with my adults, I would say like,
sorry,
hey, I realize that I'm showing up in not my typical
as a blueberry
attire. And they'd be like, girl, it's fine. Like, we don't care as long as like you're chill. And they'd say, do you want change? I'd be like, I can. And they'd be like, I don't need you to. So it is just about like comfort. And then also, that's a very different topic based on just like normal. But like, I feel like clients don't really care that much if we're wearing a suit.
So again, if you have an opinion on this, let us know. Drop it in whatever comment section is closest to you. Do you care what your therapist shows up in? And like, at what point would you care if you don't? I would really love to know. I think we would both really love to know.
Okay. So next one. Don't talk about the business side of therapy. It ruins the therapeutic relationship.
That's not a grad school rule, I don't think. I think that's just like a industry norm. That's one that I fight with.
Yeah.
I think also because we don't have a choice anymore.
Yeah, because we are the owners of said business that we are counseling under.
We don't outsource. We obviously we have the world's best marketing consultants that we work with, who are the reasons why that we're doing this right now.
Love you guys.
Zach and Bree, thank you for being you. But yeah, I mean, the two of us do everything, which is funny because I'll go from cleaning a toilet and then like running billing and accounting and things like that within 20 minutes. So I think that rule definitely exists because people do argue that it hurts the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
But I would argue that it strengthens it because I do think that, yes, I think the therapeutic relationship is the most important thing ever in terms of outcomes. But at the end of the day, like this is still our job and this is still a business. And we do have to keep our lights on as a practice and as people.
And I think the difference with us is we're able to have those conversations because before even starting this business, like when it was like a baby idea in our brains, we were saying, how can we create this business to be great for the clinicians, but also great for our clients and make sure that everyone is being taken care of. So if people have questions, like, I don't mind answering.
Absolutely.
Because I know that the groundwork that we have created is beneficial for everyone. And it's not like we're big corporation, capitalism, we only care about money. No, we like care about the people that come in our doors. And I'm fine with like talking about that and the decisions we've made in order to maintain that while also maintaining the like, this is our job.
It is. And I think that like it's definitely a privilege to get to this point because we have spent more of our career outside of this than we have in it. Because I do remember at one point it was actually in my contract at a job that I wasn't allowed to talk about billing and I wasn't allowed to talk about fees and things like that. Which was honestly very difficult for me because clients would come in talking about the financial stress of coming to see me for therapy based on all of that information, if they were with us now at Soul Haven, I would say, like, let's talk about our sliding fee scale and like how much can we slide. Obviously we have to find a limit there to make sure that our time is valued. But I think that talking about these things, it just helps. Again, it makes things more genuine and more authentic. And it also helps rid of any extra stress that we can. I am very glad that we started the business, though, having that, like, okay, how can we be just as kind to ourselves as we are to our clients? Because I feel like that's pretty rare. Yeah.
Next one. You shouldn't be on social media. You shouldn't be doing a podcast.
No, not at all. That's a grad school rule for sure. Yeah. Again, it's just this idea that we were told that you have to be perfect and invisible. I think so, because it was this idea of we're a blank slate, we're only there for clients, and we can't have our own priorities too.
And they shouldn't know about what you do outside of the building.
It's like teachers. Like I remember in schools, the kids would be like, "Do you live here?" Like, no.
It's like Santa Claus.
Or I'd see them at Target. They'd be like, you go to Target? It's like more than I would care to admit.
You don't live in this room? It's like, no, I do not.
I don't.
I do have a life outside of this room. Yeah, and like, obviously we're on social media. And of course, I believe we talked about this last time maybe too, but the boundary of what that means, like social media, we're not going to be following you with our private accounts, like our personal accounts, those kinds of things. But having like our Soul Haven Instagram and our Soul Haven TikTok and Facebook, all of those things, we use that as a means for information and education, as well as just to like update and to get feedback from how you guys are doing to support the community well. So to me, it's kind of baffling to be like, no, you shouldn't be on that, because it's like, okay, so we're just making mental health less accessible.
Exactly. Well, even like with our established clients, I do have some clients who say like, I love listening to your podcast in between our sessions, because I feel like, obviously I'm not in session with you right now, but I feel like I'm still getting a dose of therapy with Sarah. And it's like, no, that's exactly why we're doing this, is because yes, it's more conversational and it's a little bit more like of the human side of things, but it's still very clinical and it's still very beneficial for mental health work too. So yes, like we won't follow you on our like personal accounts or anything, but if you see like a therapist's like public business practice social media profile, like go for it. I know for us, like I've even like posted when like Soul Haven has been closed or things like that. And we even posted like a love letter to our clients for Valentine's Day. Like, please go look at that. Like, it's for you.
Yeah. And of course that's going to look different from page to page. Like our page, we were told, what was it? Don't create, just capture.
Yeah, it's like don't create content, just capture like who you are, things like that.
Yeah, and we want to show like who we are as people, and as well as how we operate. And so the professional side, as well as just like us as humans in that therapeutic space, because I think we made it very clear. That's very important to us. So it's kind of it's a way to do that. If you know, you're not sitting with us in a room for 50 minutes, at least you can see on our page like what that might look like and if that's right for you or not.
Absolutely. I know for our last rule, it's never give advice to clients.
So I will do this thing, and this might get a lot of comments actually, potentially, but I will say, okay, do you want a therapist answer or do you want a Caroline answer?
I do the exact same thing. I said, do you want to hear from Sarah, who's a therapist, or Sarah, who's a human being? I literally do the same exact thing. And it sounds bad, but like people really enjoy that.
Most of them always pick I've never had someone say, I want the counselor answer.
I usually say like typically people say like, I usually want your human being answer, or I want both to see if they differ. It's like, absolutely, of course.
Yeah. So, in like advice, that's a hard term, because it's not like my advice on it. It's more,
it's like impressions.
Yes. Yeah. Of like what I'm seeing kind of thing. Yeah. And you know, you've got those clients that you've been with for years, and you can respond in a different way that you know works best for them, versus a client that comes in and it's like day one, I would probably be like, I'm not sure that we're ready for that. Like that might be the only time that I say like, I don't, you know, like that would not be something that, like, so I'll have a lot of people say, can you give me advice on this?
Because then it turns into like people pleasing. I think if there's no relationship built, it's like, why is my opinion outside of the clinical impression weighing that heavily on you in our first session?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. So I think it's timing based and relationship based.
Because then I think that people think that going to therapy is just like advice giving.
Yeah.
It's not at all. It's anything but that, but it can include that sporadically. It's like the old food pyramid. I know that's not relevant, or it's very outdated now, but I remember like the very top of the food pyramid, it was like consume sparingly. I think of advice as like the very top of like a therapy pyramid of like it exists and like you can go ask for it, but it's not like the foundation of therapy at all.
Right. And I like the foundation part, like that groundwork has to be set.
Yes.
Of a lot of times we'll talk about like a content or like, you know, boundary setting and what that looks like and kind of that, and we'll have a whole conversation. They'll be like, okay, well, I don't understand how I would do this. What could be something that I would say? Like, I guess you could kind of consider that advice, but I consider that more just like, I don't know.
I think it's making it realistic.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about like, especially on the holidays when we talk a lot about boundaries with clients, there would be so many times where we'd talk about, okay, how do we set boundaries with this person that you're going to be around for the holidays? And we would talk about a very clinical therapeutic way of going about it.
Yeah.
But then my client, I could tell that they wouldn't feel like it would work. And so that's when I would say, let's make this realistic.
Yeah.
So I guess that could be perceived as advice, but I think it's just making therapy more realistic and more personalized at the end of the day.
The personalized, the specialized.
Yes.
Also, I'm noticing as we're sitting here, both of us are using
our hands.
The hand a lot.
We need more fidget.
Watching on YouTube, like I just realized I keep doing this.
Yeah.
Like it's the fidget tick. So and our Italians are coming out. But anyways, so those are all the things, and I'm sure there's actually more.
Probably.
But as of to date, these are the ones that we
these are the ones we can think of.
These are the ones we can think of. And probably the ones that we break the most.
Yeah. So we'll say, drop in the comments, was there a rule that we break that you were most surprised the rule exists, or are you most surprised that we break it? Or if you just have thoughts about any of these different things, your own feelings about it, let us know. We would really love to hear from you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it makes us better therapists, and I don't know, your voice matters.
We just like to chat.
Yeah. So I will say, to wrap things up, what is, if you could break any rule, what would you break? So like as a therapist, break all these rules. This could be like an ACA code of ethics rule that you break.
If I could, okay, I'll give a caveat. If I could break this rule and if I could do it in a way that was only helpful and if I knew it was going to be helpful, sometimes I do just want to say like, leave them.
Break up with your partner.
Break up with them. Like there's sometimes, or even just like a friend of like, you don't need that friend. Like they do not sound like a nice human to you. They are not serving you well. So sometimes I wish that I could give like that big
super
piece of
directed
advice.
advice.
Of like, just like don't.
Just don't.
Sure. And so that's what I wish that I could do sometimes. But of course, the reason that we don't do that is because we don't live in y'all's lives.
And we're not life coaches either.
And like, we want to create a space where you feel most comfortable with whatever decision that you make.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I do just want to be like, because I know sometimes I would, even in my own therapy, while going through grad school of becoming a therapist, I would say, what should I do?
Tell me. Yes. And I feel like we're told that a lot. It's like, tell me what to do.
Yes.
It's like, no.
And every time they were like, I can't tell you what to do. And I say that now, I can't tell you what to do. But I just wanted it. I wanted it so bad. And so sometimes I want to give that. So what would be yours?
I would love to set my clients up with each other. I have had, obviously this breaks HIPAA, this breaks pretty much every rule in the book. Oh, there's just some clients where I'm like,
you two would be perfect.
You'd work so well together. Oh my goodness. And especially like over the years, because I've seen a lot of people at this point, there's just sometimes where like I have a new client and I'm like, oh man, you'd be a great match for this person.
Or even my friends. I've had some clients and I'm like, you would be like perfect for my friend in my mind. And I'm like,
I can't say that. Can't say that. We'll never say that. Won't even drop a hint.
Won't even bring that up in any capacity.
Yeah.
We pretend like that doesn't happen at
we
all.
We check that part of our life at the door.
But yeah, I could see that of being like, you guys would be great together.
Yes. Well, and I think it's one of the most wholesome things. It's the same thing for you. We're trying to make our clients the best versions of themselves and help them be happy. I'm like, you two would work so well together. Again, I'm still using my hands right now. But I would love to do that sometime.
Oh, that's a fun one. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
So to end things on a really unhinged note.
Oh.
Because it's us, and while we're already using all the hand gestures, we need some fidgets for next time. Yeah. After tax season, let's invest in some therapist fidgets. What is the most untherapist thing that you've done recently? At work.
Yeah. I cursed.
Yeah.
I cursed in a session.
It happens.
Because they cursed, and then I was like, I was rephrasing, and I was trying to use their own term for something.
Yeah.
And so I used that. It was obviously with an adult.
Yes.
It was not with a child. But with the adult, she used it to discuss what she's talking about, and she said the word, and she called someone that word. Yeah. And so I was like, and I even paused too. I was like, the one that we called and then I said it. So that would probably be the most untherapist thing.
I do that really often.
Yeah. Do you really?
I do very often.
Yeah. Cursing just never been a thing I do.
I think that's what my clients do, and I try to just match them.
I match that vibe, and sometimes clients will be like, "Am I allowed to curse in here?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course."
Say whatever you want.
Sometimes when that's happening, and I'm reframing or restating what they do, I threw it in there, and it felt nice.
And it sounds bad. Some days there's just not a better word.
Yeah.
And I'll even tell a client, and I'd say I'm sorry. Especially because if it's a long-time client and it's relevant, there's not a better word I can use for this now than this one. So I like that.
Yeah,
it's a cool therapist rule to break, I will say.
Cursing. What about you? What was your least therapist thing?
Oh boy, this might get a lot of heat. I'm interested to hear your reaction to this one. So I have two things that I think about. One of them, oh my goodness, I'm just thinking about our professors in grad school.
Start sweating immediately.
Yes. We talked about how a shower beer can be a grounding exercise.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I love that. I love that. Okay, so a shower beer.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I've been seeing this client for several years. Yeah. And I know that there's, first of all, it's nothing related to substances. That's not the work that we do.
Yeah.
And so I've never had a concern. And that's something that we've talked about before, how we cope. But this person's a foodie. And if someone is a foodie, and we're talking about sensory integrations and grounding for a very busy person. Hello. And so I mentioned, I said, hey, the juxtaposition between a very warm shower and a very cold beverage, that's a great way to ground yourself. And I even said, throw on some music.
Yes.
The idea of a ice cold shower beer and a warm shower with some music on.
Well, and you can give this to your client, but they also make little holders for the shower. I actually currently have one.
I love that.
So that you can hang your wine or your beer in the shower with you.
I dig it.
So shower beers, I'm all for them.
Sure.
Also, Kyle did not know what a shower beer was. It's how are you 30 plus years old and you don't know what a shower beer is?
Yeah. I mean, I obviously don't really drink that much, but when I think about it in a regulation standpoint, it's incredible. So I will say that was one of the most untherapist things I've ever done. That. And even after I said it, I was like, is this okay for me to respond? And the client was like, no, I love this idea. And they actually came back later and they were like, this was the best thing. I've never felt more relaxed and grounded. Because we had a limit of we're going to have one standard drink.
Right.
So that it's not a vice. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then I wrote a client a poem recently.
That's beautiful.
It wasn't one of those beautiful poems. It was funny. But it was, so obviously we occasionally give our clients homework. And when I typically give homework, I like to tell the clients, okay, I've given you something to do between now and next time. Is there anything that I can do to support you?
Yeah.
And this client just said hey, can you check in for accountability to make sure that I'm actually doing the homework? Which mad respect for that.
Honestly, mad respect.
Incredible, because especially the homework was very heavily based in trauma work. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, like I will send you an email. Is the email okay? I said, absolutely. And so
Consent.
I was right.
Love
I was
consent.
starting to write the email, and I was thinking, like, I don't want this to feel formal. If this client is doing amazing work in session and outside of session, I want to be able to provide accountability and levity because they're a rock star.
Yeah.
So I wrote a poem for them to check in to see if they were doing their homework.
That is so cool.
It went really well, but it was just one of those where, like, I'm very grateful that we can break rules like this now.
Shower beers, poems,
cursing,
via email, and cursing. So those are the most recent.
Yes, and the list will grow. But if you're listening to this, first of all, how would you feel if your therapist did some of these things?
Yeah.
And then, do you have any questions about our rules too? And like, what are your reactions to these? If your therapist told you, would you be okay with it? Or
yeah, we're open to all sides, all thoughts, all the things. Absolutely. We want to hear it. That's why we do this. We love to hear each other talk. Sarcasm. So it's definitely not because we just love talking. We want to like connect with you guys. So definitely feel free to comment, follow us, reach out to us, whatever means that you need.
And of course, like, Couch Combos is not a substitute for therapy. If you are in immediate crisis danger, please call 911, visit your closest emergency room, and get the help that you so well deserve. But if you want to hear more and have any kind of ideas for podcasts, let us know in the comments as well. Or if you want to work with us for therapy, give us a follow on Instagram. All of our information is there. Or look at our website at www.soulhavengeorgia.com.
Wow, episode 7.
And we'll catch you for episode 8.
Yeah. Can I get a fist bump?
Oh, yeah. Consent for touching.
Consent for fist bumps.